go live.
Hello. Welcome back to the Watching Privacy Show. Kind of missed that intro music. We got Brent and Raji with us again. And after a little bit of a hiatus, I think we want to kind of do a little recap of the year and some predictions for what we kind of see going forward in the world of privacy. And I think we've had a lot happen in the year. I'm not sure we'll be able to fit everything in, but I guess we can probably start. But I guess before I do that, how's everybody doing, Brent? Nice hat. I'll state the obvious, I guess, to begin with, and then how are you really doing, though?
So good to see you, Tejas. How about them boys? You're doing pretty good there. Hey, it's good to see you guys, and it's good to be back, and just rap about kind of the big things that we saw this year, and maybe what we expect or hope to see next year when it comes to this. It's definitely been a very active scene when it comes to privacy. So looking forward to doing a little recap.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Yeah, so I thought I pulled out a couple, I guess, kind of themes that I saw over the course of the past 6, maybe 12 months, give or take. And then some more current events, I guess, with things going on right now. But a big theme that's kind of gone throughout the entire year is really around children and surveillance and tracking. We've talked about the story a couple of times, even earlier in the year. I mean, I'm probably sure last year as well. But the big catalyst for the story was, I believe, France ends up banning Office 365 and Google Workspace in schools, which is a pretty big hit because I'd say Google and Microsoft pretty much have a pretty big monopoly on education, email, docs, stuff like that. And for France to ban them because of privacy concerns for students, I'm not sure how that correlates to maybe EU regulation, but I would imagine there could be something coming there as well. But then in addition to that, we've seen a bunch of different just software targeted for, not targeted at kids, but I guess used by kids, sometimes targeted by kids, just exploiting their privacy in a lot of different ways. Even though there's rules and regulations around it, we've kind of seen from social media apps, there's been a big rise of these kind of maybe micro network apps within schools and high schools and middle schools and stuff like that. And so any, I'd say, high level thoughts or other stories around kind of just kids and privacy and awareness and things along those lines from either of you guys that you saw for the year?
I think there are two things I noticed. One, obviously, France blocking this is a big deal. I actually didn't expect a country to go down that far. But there are two reasons I think they have stated. One is privacy, but the second one is data leaving EU. And we have repeatedly discussed this topic in the past, where countries will want the data of their citizens within the country, right? So I think that's a trend that we'll likely see next year too. But this falls into the same bucket. But in general, surveillance is pretty common in the students. I mean, my own kids go to school, and they are forced to use Google, and all the discussions happen on Facebook, and we reluctantly had to create a Facebook account to collaborate, and that's not a welcome thing. I think one of the surveys found that about 90+% of software that kids use has surveillance embedded in there, and that's going on, and people don't seem to care, and that's the fundamental issue. I think those have to be addressed. When companies don't take this seriously, countries will through legislation, and that's what we are seeing. France is probably just the beginning. We'll likely see this with every major country.
I'm almost numb, maybe, because we started doing this about a year and a half ago, and we touched on a number of big hot button issues when it comes to privacy. I think maybe after that Supreme Court decision around Roe versus Wade, that seemed to spark some sort of a backlash with women not wanting to use certain apps because of the data tracking potential and the potential of that data being used against them. And I thought maybe that was going to be a huge turning point. And then we also, as Raju talked about, it's kind of an ongoing episode after episode when it comes to our children and how their use of apps is, they're being targeted to use things. And I think a lot of times the apps have the best of intention, or the folks making the apps have the best of intention of actually trying to give solutions that will be helpful for children. But sometimes the unintended consequences that become the bigger issue. And so I think this whole, year and a half that we've been doing this, it feels like more and more has come up. But then to Raju's point, it also feels like people aren't that uptight about it. And that's really a kind of a curious thing. I think when it comes to the women health issues and the children, there was definitely, an uptick. But just generally speaking, it doesn't feel like people are very worried to the point where they're willing to give up certain things, use of certain apps. That's interesting to me.
I think the way I'm looking at it, I mean, if you look at the core issue, why is this occurring? The fundamental issue is schools and colleges, they don't have the budget. Schools don't have the budget to spend on software. They use hundreds of applications and they don't have budgets. They are running on a tight budget. That's why, the teachers' salaries are not high. They should be higher than what they are today. And they should have better budgets for software. When there are no budgets available to purchase software, and that's where when there are free alternatives available, they'll jump. And it's not using tools versus using free tools is the option they're provided. And in this case, they choose the so-called free tools from surveillance companies. And certainly surveillance companies come in, and in return, the schools are paying for these applications through data, and not their data, their students' data without parents' permission. And therein lies the issue. And unless the budget issue is addressed, or unless there are strict rules in place, I suspect this will continue. When there is no policies that are set in place, I think the current abuse will continue by tracking and selling children's information, which is, people, this is where, when it comes to surveillance companies, morality is thrown out the window.
I think, you make a good point on the budget aspect. And if you take that and you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at obviously like unfavorable macroeconomic conditions, do we think that maybe as budgets for things start tightening up, that companies find new ways to generate revenue or squeeze a few extra pennies? Because ultimately, no different than a school district being on a limited budget, a company or an organization on a limited budget is going to have to find ways to either increase revenue through other digital data means, or procure software that is supported by maybe employee data or maybe member data of any kind, right?
Yeah, I think you're hitting onto it. And it's one of those things I was going to ask about. If we're in this kind of position now, when the economy potentially goes into recession next year with even more limited dollars, does that data become so enticing to use as a replacement for a dollar? So do you see even less function or focus on privacy, because that data that is being generated from using these apps becomes even more valuable in terms of bartering? And so the economy's tough, so we're gonna let you use our data even more. I can see that happening and try to kind of seamlessly, actually.
And surveillance companies particularly look at education as another vertical they can target, and it has become a profitable thing. I like the move China made on this. I don't know if it is early this year or maybe last year. I think it's early this year, where they banned companies to, especially private educational companies, from making a significant profit or some such thing, investments, private investments going into it. And that kind of detracts this, where you're making education as a max for maximizing profits. And that is a good direction to take. I generally like the direction they were going, because there are a lot of private institutes with billions of dollars for VCs or VC dollars fund going into it. And when dollars go into it, that means they're maximizing, thinking about maximizing profits in the name of education. And that is so, by China, by banning that, it does a good move. And the same thing, if we can ban, say, surveillance or some of these from for the education institutes, and then that as a vertical, can be addressed in a slightly different way. And there are vendors out there that will pop up to serve at a certain profit margins, and that should be reasonable. I think currently it is treated as yet another way, or get the information about kids right from their early age and track them all the way till they get old. And that is some of the motivation with surveillance companies. And when companies don't do it, now countries are coming in through regulation. France is one. I think US is also looking at one such regulation, and every country will. And the amount of abuse that is prevalent across the board, it's not just education. Look at games, kids games on app stores. It's insane. The amount of ads that are there, insane. I actually don't install apps for my kids that are outside of arcade. Just for
the
this
Apple
reason.
Arcade thing.
Apple Arcade, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at other apps that have ads and they collect all the information through, it's insanity. And that surveillance has gone too far. And the way you only control it is probably through regulation at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even on the, I'd say, what do you call it? For the game aspect, another pivot on that I've seen kind of a trend for is streaming services and the targeting of kind of kids there, because obviously especially I'd say Disney, Netflix, whatever, Hulu, all these guys, everyone's big on kids shows and trying to get people locked into the kids, because I mean, honestly, it's kind of a smart business model. You find a kid who's like addicted to some TV show, then as a parent, you really can't cancel it. The amount of times I've seen the same show over and over and over and over and over again at like friends' houses and families' houses, because their kid is just like stuck on that one show. But what I've seen a lot of these streaming services do is they focused on like creating the kid's profile and trying to filter out, the non-kids shows from the kids shows. But I'd say that's probably a mask from really the tracking that's happening, because technically they're not allowed to track under 13. So when you have like an adult or a regular account that goes in and starts watching some, I don't know, Blue's Clues or whatever they're watching, they're not supposed to be tracking it. So how do they know who's watching it, what type of thing they're watching? And I think in an attempt to try to segregate that, the age groups and figure out what they can and can't track, they'll try to track even more in order to identify the type of person they're allowed to track. Almost seems counterintuitive, but you have to track somebody more to know if you're allowed to track them or not. But I mean, it's pretty adjacent to the game story, because like I think people just realize that maybe the kid demographic is a little bit more valuable and the easier target, because it's easier to kind of suck in general than maybe adult content is. But similar vein across all three, games, software, and media, I'd say online in general.
Hey, what do you guys think? And this is a little off target, but it's kind of, when you think of Amazon looking to offer to pay people to have access, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a step in the right direction, wrong direction?
Is that how you paid for that new hat?
I'm just curious. Do you give them more credit for saying, "Hey, look, we'll pay you a couple of bucks and we'll take your data," as opposed to these kind of back room, always changing your privacy policy to try to take advantage? Do you give them credit, or do you? Well, what are your thoughts on that? Because it was very interesting to see them just come out and say, "Hey, look, we'll give you a couple of bucks if you let us have full total access to your data.
I think it's a gold rush. It's like basically it's a sign of desperation from them, knowing that like the gradual collection of data behind the scenes is not fast enough to outpace the competition of Google and other tech companies. And so it's like, you know what, if we got to chuck a couple dollars, it's worth it because it's definitely an arms race. And I think, you know, the bigger your data sets and the more you can collect, the bigger moat you basically create for yourself and the safer you are in the long term. So I'd say it's like they realize just how valuable it is, and it's not like they're trying to cut people in and let people share in like the revenue being generated or anything like that. It's a very can't think of the right word, but it's a very shady way of generally having a broader business sense that there's I wouldn't say a limited amount of data, but you know the race to the most data is alive and running, and this is kind of like adding steroids a little bit. If I pay my users, then I'll get a little bit more faster rather than everybody else collecting it through their natural means. That's kind of the way I see it. What do you think, Raju?
Yeah, I agree. And doing it, just one additional point I want to add is there is doing it while it continues to be the wild west, because the regulation will come in soon, and you don't have a lot of time. There are a lot of regulation being discussed before it comes in. What is the easiest way to collect all the data? And maybe consider paying. I think that is what I look at it. I think if that, you know, now if there is a limited window, every vendor will go down the path.
Well,
yeah, I think Amazon even had this thing before. I'm pretty sure it was Amazon, but like they have that Mechanical Turk service where I'm pretty sure Mechanical Turk, right? And so like they'll pay you like pennies or $1 or whatever to do certain services, and that's where a lot of like I think receipt scanning and a lot of like check scanning, like, you know, when you do a mobile deposit of a check on your mobile app, that happens because someone has sit there and like filtered it and identified it so many times, partially automated, but partially because someone has to manually tag that stuff. That's kind of like the hidden behind the scenes that people don't realize, that there's a whole economy of tagging this data, because you can collect as much as you want to, especially images and recognition of stuff. But unless that tagging can get better and be automated, but to start it off, to basically like cranking the engine, it has to be done through manual means, and that's what a lot of this is too, I think.
Well,
and
ahead.
isn't Amazon losing money on every Alexa or something?
Well, the big story was they lost 10 billion. I don't know if it was overall, but apparently Alexa has been as a business unit has lost $10 billion, and they, if you notice, they've kind of been cutting back on you know, prompting that up. So it sounds like, you know, they're cutting back. But I want to flip and ask you, going back to this $2-3 thing, with the economy being uncertain, with the potential specter of recession, do you think it'll work? Because people are going to be like, oh, shoot, I need the money. I don't have to do anything other than let them, you know, have my data. Do you think this will actually work?
So let me understand this right. So currently customers pay for Alexa, and then so they are paying, let's say $70, $100, how much it is. I mean, Brent, you have every version of Alexa. Right? So
so they can range from like 20 to like 100.
Notice you can say that word. You can say it easily. There's no response anymore.
Awesome. So you're paying, let's say $100 for an Alexa, and you're paying on top of it, you're being tracked. And it is likely that for every, say, $100, Amazon is losing $10 or whatever that amount. Now they're saying, damn, this is not working. Instead, it's better to pay money to the customer directly for $2 and then get that data instead of selling more Alexas and losing more money. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, but will it work from the consumer side? Is like, hey, you know, times are tough. Free money because I don't have to do anything. They'll just pay me to access my data.
I don't think it will work directly, but it will work indirectly in the sense that when Amazon silently, at some point, when times get tough, they include it as a feature within your Prime service and do it anyway, and change the terms and conditions, and you get a 10% discount on your Prime subscription. Then yeah, it'll work.
There it is.
Yeah.
Some of these companies have so many levers they can pull on to extract money, right? And you just came up with an interesting one.
Extract is the right word. If you ask the customer, they won't. If you cheat the customer, they will. And Facebook learnt it, right? We have seen that with Facebook's revenue go down and everything, stock go down and whatnot, because they learned that if customers were given the choice, well, they will opt out of surveillance. And if you have the business model the right way, their revenues will not be close to what they are today. And as they are learning through Apple's ATT program. So I think if customers know about it, increasingly they are moving towards opting to keep their information private.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Apple thing. I think this is a perfect segue because this has been a big story for the year, and everybody's sitting here blaming Apple. And Apple's not doing themselves any favors with other moves that they're making. But at least it's hard to separate the two because the two actions being one, an increase in Apple ad unit or ad revenue, ad sales, ad functionality within their ecosystem, and then on the other hand, privacy. And so the Apple argument would be like first party data when you use Apple apps, like maybe news or stocks or whatever, and you're tracking it. And we serve apps through or ads through Apple. That's, all first party data you're consenting to or whatever. And then you get the counter argument of you run the operating system. So the way your notifications come in and the way your disclosures come in, you can have a little bit more freedom than other companies have. But I think at the fundamental level, if you separate the two stories of app tracking and Apple's ad revenue model and focus just on app tracking, what Raju said is spot on. And so many people I've read online that are basically saying that like Apple destroyed all these small businesses and all this marketing and all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, what Facebook was doing and everybody that was relying on Facebook was you were relying on data that was stolen from customers. I mean, it's theft of data basically because it's not willingly given, and things that are taken without permission is theft. And so it's the stealing of data being used to micro target. And I think a lot of people who are unhappy about the change, they'll realize what Raju said is sometimes you need a sound business model. You don't need 40 versions of X product. And if you're able to marginally be successful selling the 41st version of it, that's not really business success. That's just, you're funneling revenue for marketing dollars and sending it back to Facebook. Facebook was getting rich and you were maybe making pennies on the dollar there. So it's a very convoluted argument, but definitely a big privacy thing that was went around for the whole year that a lot of people, I think, conveniently leave out certain details that either fit their narrative or whatever. But yeah, there's no story more than that. I mean, the problem is if Apple just wasn't so greedy, and maybe it's not Apple being greedy, maybe it's investors being greedy. Ads are an extremely high margin business and a very lucrative one at that. So you want to get into it. And so it's just an unfortunate situation because the pennies that they make in the grand scheme of things from advertising is just not worth any kind of compromised kind of visibility in terms of their moral stance on ads and privacy. Because ads and latest iOS versions, like ads are just kind of getting, I don't know, like intrusive on your phone. Like now I get a notification for like Arcade or Apple Plus or Apple TV Plus on my phone all the time. It's like, dude, like this is not what I bought an Apple for. That's why specifically I got an iPhone and not an Android phone. But yeah, that's my little rant. What do you guys got on that?
It's a loss of trust. Before they expanded their ad division, I had high trust on Apple. I still do, but it's not as close to as it was back then. The trust factor went down and it's a bad move. I hope they realize it. They got it right with privacy and now they're digging themselves a hole by going in the opposite direction, by trying to have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. Privacy and ads, they don't mix because like every time I think twice, even for Apple, I think twice about sharing my information now. Earlier I used to trust Apple. I don't anymore, not as much as I used to. I still applaud them for being the sole company that is taking privacy seriously and all the moves, and more recently their privacy and security aspect with the latest version. I commend all of that, but I think they're not doing themselves a favor by getting into ads and expanding there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think it's only the tip of the iceberg for them, unfortunately, because look at what they're doing with Apple Plus and the content They're buying lots of shows, they're buying live sports, and when you do that kind of stuff, you're gonna have to do ads. I mean, they they don't, because they make so much money, but it feels like they're doing this content, build up, and they're getting live streams, and they're getting people subscribing to Apple Plus. Maybe it's just too enticing. Maybe they say, hey, we're doing good on the privacy side. We can do a little more over here because net, yeah, we're doing better than everybody else. They don't need to do it though. That's the only thing. They don't need to do this.
When this is what the bubble times do broadly at the macro level. When the valuation goes from $1 trillion to what, 2.8 $2.6 trillion, they have to justify that. When it starts crashing, there is pressure from investors to show that it's worth it, and they will pull all the levers that they have, and ads is one of them, to keep the valuation high. At some point, somebody should be bold enough and say, we are not going to be doing it, and take the hit. But take the hit sometime means taking the job. And from an investor's point of view, that's where it becomes tougher as a public company for them to stay on their morals, and this is part of the pressure. They can do it. Typically it is the founders that are bold enough to take some of these bold moves. Unfortunately, Apple doesn't have that yet, currently. So that's where I think they are going down that path. But now, as the market starts going down, it's going to be a testy time for them.
Yeah, I think speaking of bold moves and founders making bets, the metaverse obviously comes to mind because I can't even say that sentence with a straight face. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, there's like the whole metaverse play, and maybe the pivot from Facebook, maybe understanding that ads and that market might not be best. So maybe owning the operating system for the VR platform that they're working on is kind of their next move. But at the end of the day, even Apple owning the operating system came full circle to them doing ads, because to monetize the operating system, you're going to run ads on top of whatever you want. I think Facebook's trying to make a push for what do you call openness and all this kind of stuff that they say for the Oculus platform. But ultimately, even they see arguably the writing on the wall. And whether, I mean, we laugh at the metaverse or whatever, but I would say like some credit has to be due for trying to pivot away from a big chunk of your money coming straight from advertising. You got to diversify somehow, and whether this hits or doesn't, at least it's an effort to move away from ads, because clearly you're burning a lot of money in order to try to have a different revenue stream from just ads, right?
Yeah, diversifying, but I'm looking at it as a sign of the times. When during bubble times, you see all kinds of craziness. During the previous bubble, there used to be a company called Second Life. Some people with gray hair will remember that. Now,
Wait a minute, you guys didn't buy an island on this?
I think that's what we're going through. They'll have to pivot. There's no way. Meta is a joke, so there's no point wasting brain cycles on that.
And the metaverse as a whole, or VR as a whole?
Yeah, metaverse as a whole. VR is a good, maybe as a gaming thing. I bought Microsoft's whatever the HoloLens about 6 years back, 7 years, something like that. I tried it. There are some good aspects of it, and from there to now, the last 6 plus years, it hasn't evolved. I bought the initial developer edition, and I still have it sitting somewhere. I probably open it up when my kid want to try a few things here and there, but it happens maybe 2 to 3 hours in a year. That's about it. So as a gamer, as an occasional thing, there is some market there, but as a full on, I don't see anything. These are all the sign of times, whether it is the Bitcoin bubble or the metaverse. These things will pop whenever there is a bubble, there's a broader bubble out there. It is a side effect of something mainstream that's going on.
I think the thing that is definitely caught on are the health devices. I mean, the watches that are able to track all sorts of different things going on with your health. That's that's the thing that is taken off dramatically, and once again, Apple is very well positioned for that. It feels like the metaverse stuff. It's too far out there for people. I mean, it's sometimes you don't even you want to get away from some of this stuff. You want to just go out your door and look outside and see the sun shining, and you don't want to have to put something on your head. Goggles. To enhance all that. And you definitely don't want to pay a lot of money. That's why I think some of this stuff. I unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective.
Maybe Oculus is just the Alexa of Facebook, basically. It's like, how can we sell Echo devices?
Why are you trying?
I didn't say anything about you. All right, fine. Not the echoes of the Facebook, right? It's the loss leader that basically gets people into the platform in order to make money, hopefully in the back end. Ultimately, it's not too far off, right? Heavy investment, lots of losses, and you're hoping you're going to recoup those in some way, shape, or form by putting a device in everyone's house and hoping you can collect whatever you can off of it, right?
It's a desperation to own a platform because they don't, Alexa with voice and this one with vision, and so it's a desperation to own a platform. And not controlling a platform has some challenges. And today there is a duopoly, especially with mobile, and some of the other vendors are at a disadvantage, and they're trying to own that. And the market will take care of itself.
Yeah, but do you think the reasons why some of this stuff is failing is it's not really privacy? It's just it's stupid. A lot of this stuff is just so out of the ordinary. You don't want to walk around with goggles, on your face. It's not. I think it's more of that before they even get to the privacy stuff.
When there is that's where the bubbles distort the field. I think that's what's happening. What is real and what is the real business, and when things settle down, as Buffett says, once the tide goes back, who is swimming naked. Alexa and Oculus and all the ones are the ones who will be currently swimming naked, and the real business models will come out, and there are a lot of other things that will be settled. So anyway, I think there are other important things to discuss.
And I guess maybe more positive news. There was a story, I think earlier this week or maybe last week, about the U.S. government finally doing something about TikTok, which was, I guess, I feel like we've heard the story on and off for the past couple of years. So who knows how much teeth is in this one? But apparently there was, I think, Senate passed regulation or a bill or something along those lines in order to ban TikTok. I don't know the details of it exactly, if it's an actual like application level ban. There was a big thing about like where data is located. I saw a pretty good interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin and the CEO of TikTok, and it was not a good interview for the CEO of TikTok. It was like he was just trying to offload and say, data is stored in the U.S. and that's what's make it safe and all this kind of stuff. But it wasn't actually confidence inspiring when he got asked about how China plays into it and how the operations and data security kind of work. It was just kind of brushed off as not important questions, basically, from what I took from it. But a couple of years later, TikTok is still here. It's not really getting any smaller. It almost seems like it kind of just comes and goes out of the stories every once in a while. But any TikTok updates?
I look at the macro picture and realize that just like US is trying to block, say, TikTok, a Chinese company, is different, and how US perceives TikTok is just the same way China perceives Google or Meta or any of these companies. Mm-hmm. So you don't want your citizen information with other countries, with vendors from other countries. And it's a double-edged sword. Now, when, say, Google blocks or US blocks TikTok, what will other countries do? Will they block Google? Will they block Facebook? All of those are going to be on there, right? So I think that is but the macro trend really is every country is going to raise these virtual walls, and they're going to want their citizen information stored within the country. And there's no question about that. I talked about this concept of data trade deficits in one of the previous episodes, where every country wants to maintain trade balance, right? There are exports, there are imports, right? They want to make sure that their exports are equal to their imports. How about data exports and data imports? if you apply that same concept to data, where how much of information does US has about people that are not from their country?
Oh, we're winning this one.
Exactly. So which means every other country perceive themselves as having data trade deficits. They don't have information about their own citizens, forget about other countries' citizens and whatnot. So when every other country is running a data trade deficit, now they want to balance that trade. How do they balance the trade? To keep their citizen information within their country in the local regulatory system. And that is what every country is going to do. That is, so through regulation you will see a lot of these virtual walls go up, so which also includes banning some countries and some companies out there that are not from their country, because they're in the business of extracting information about their citizens and taking it elsewhere. If you go back and read, say, the France blocking Google and Microsoft for there, the second reason they gave is essentially that they want their citizen information within EU as part of the GDPR, and this is tied to the same thing. So the data trade deficits will become a significant portion in coming years, and that will play a significant role. So US blocking TikTok is to make sure that US citizen information is not shared with the Chinese company. China will also do the same in reverse. So we are going to see a lot of these moving forward.
It seemed like there were two kinds of bills. There was the one to ban government employees from using TikTok, and then there's the other one is like the whole, the ban of TikTok in the whole U.S. I don't see that one. I could potentially see the government thing, because there is some, because of the information that government folks have at their disposal, you can see something around that line. But could you imagine them trying to ban the whole country from using TikTok? These younger people.
You can.
Yeah.
You can, Brent. India did it, by the way. India blocked TikTok in India.
Yeah.
How did that work? How does that?
I mean, people were pissed for a while, but a lot of it forgot. I have a buddy actually in India right now for a wedding, and in our group chat, like one of our friends sent him a TikTok link, and he tried to open it, and he couldn't open it in India. Like the webpage just goes to like this Indian government site, and it's just he couldn't open the link.
That's pretty amazing. I can't see that happening here, but yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I'd say it's a little tougher, but I mean, even like the TikTok thing, and maybe at a broader scale, what Raji was talking about the times and the bubble and all that, the big, I would say, like explosion of this creator economy kind of stuff. This is also fueled by bubble money. Like every person out there, I would say, that made a podcast or a show like ours, but because we don't have sponsors, but everyone's fueled by the same sponsors, and sponsors are blowing money because they had easy money to blow. And all these social media sites like TikTok or whatever have these like creator funds and stuff like that. That is all money coming in from advertising. And as ad dollars and marketing dollars start drying up, as organizations have to start tightening their budgets, that whole like creator economy is going to shrink. If not, I wouldn't say collapse, but it will shrink, where the whole push for it being such a big thing and an explosion is not going to be the explosion, because it's funded by bubble money. It's not, I mean, partially it is creativity and like stuff like that, but I don't think it was never sustainable to have like the 1 million+ podcasts with like Athletic Greens and ExpressVPN sponsoring like every single one of them. Like it's not scalable, and it's not a good long-term business model.
It's an explosion of marketing or advertising, and which is an explosion of marketing money that went into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that marketing money, how did that come? It's an explosion of a lot of VC investments that went into the startups. There are 100+ billion of VC investment, or maybe hundreds, that is going in every year, which is a result of a lot of loose monetary policies, money printing or whatnot. Now, when that is tightened at the root, where money is now being pulled back into this, it's not quantitative easing anymore; it's quantitative tightening. And now the reverse process is coming in, and which means less marketing budgets, which means less advertising, which means less creator economy. So the root cause is excessive money and the bubble, and now it is going to be the reverse process that's going to be impacted. That also has an impact on advertising, which means as a surveillance company, as an advertiser, as a surveillance company, you don't have as many advertisers advertising in your platform, which means, but you have to maintain your revenue, and that also means to maintain the same levels of revenue, you have to figure out a way to continue maintaining that revenue. That means, maybe you will draw the moral line even further out, which includes selling additional information about your customers to keep those revenues. And these are the things that we'll likely see moving forward. So that is the macro level driver, I believe, is something we're going to see next year.
I think even for then probably a good segue to a more recent topic, even about advertisers kind of drying up. So Elon bought Twitter, I guess, recently, and that's been a story for a while. But I'd say the privacy considerations there have been a little murky at best. But the most recent story that just popped off, I think yesterday or the day before or whatever, was there was a couple accounts that basically follow around private jets of a lot of people. Elon Musk, Bezos, a few other people. I think there's just jets. Like, it's like an automated Twitter account that basically will post. The data that they post is basically, I think, public data that comes from like some FAA, like flight records or something like that. And the reason Elon, I guess originally maybe a while back, he had posted that he believes in free speech, and even the account that tracks his plane is going to be allowed or whatever. And then I think it was easy for him to say that in the moment, and then a couple days ago, I guess some relatively crazy person tried to like harass, I guess, his kid who landed somewhere and like jumped on the car or something along those lines. And I think that just kind of probably spooked him and said, you know what, this is ridiculous. This shouldn't happen. And so the idea of just kind of location tracking overall, not really Twitter specifically, but just kind of the security implications of it, I think a lot of regular people probably don't really relate. For us, like, a lot of people will look at that story and be like, look, Elon has plenty of money. He can hire security. What are we even talking about here? But like, for the regular person that isn't hiring security, is that information safe? Or, maybe you have a stalker in like your regular life. Maybe somebody wants to just track you and add you or do advertising or something to you that way. There's a lot of other ways where location data is becoming more and more important. I think almost everything is requiring location tracking. We talked about AirTags and location tracking for a while, at least from what we can tell. That's in a little bit more of a private ecosystem, but still there's privacy considerations because you're automatically opted into sharing your location in order to find these AirTags and stuff like that. But in general, the idea of kind of just the location data economy, if you will, has become, I think, going to be a big thing going forward continually, because I think patterns and motion trends are going to be kind of the best way to connect real world activities from online activities. And as they kind of merge, that is like the glue or the join table that basically connects the two dots. What did you guys think? Either not so much about Elon buying Twitter. That's not the story, but more so about, the account of tracking people's planes or privacy of, location information, that kind of thing.
I mean, generally, sharing private information about someone without their permission is an issue. Without their permission is the key. A lot of information is public, but if you're trying to bring attention to that, and especially maybe a controversial individuals or whatnot, then it becomes a privacy abuse and whatnot. I'm not a fan of that. We should not do that. Like, take let me give you a different example. In US, not just the flight data, house data is public. You can look up an address of any individual out there on respective websites, county sites and whatnot. And imagine trying to publish their address information without their permission. Is that the right thing to do? There is a line where you draw where some things are acceptable, some things are not. And publishing someone's private information and tracking them and without their permission is I don't think should be acceptable, because like Google knows where you are at any point of time. Google knows your house, Apple knows your house, Facebook knows a lot of these things. Now imagine pinpointing to one individual and publishing that information publicly. just because there is some information doesn't mean that you have to bring attention to that. I think that is where once the line is drawn, then the line that each individual draws is different, and that has to be defined by the company or by the individual. And Twitter is basically saying this is where we're drawing the line.
Yeah, sorry, before you go, Brent. Actually, a little side note, but interesting. I got a new iPhone probably a couple months ago whenever the 14 thing came out. And one thing I did notice about like Apple knowing your location is like it's definitely on phone, because after I switched phones, it would always tell me to go, like it wouldn't know where my house was anymore. So like normally whenever I plug it into my car or whatever, it'll tell you like, do you want to drive home or whatever, but it didn't know where my home was. So I had to like basically relearn on that phone where my house is, where my work is, where like my common destinations are. So I'd say that was like maybe a little bit of a redeeming quality where I just felt like, all right, cool. It's not like you log into your Google account and Google Maps automatically knows your home and your work and all that stuff. This is like definitely on device, like tracking that they're doing, which was, I guess, a positive sign. But yeah, that's just a little tangent. Go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
No, that's interesting. The whole geolocation stuff, right? Taking things virtual to real life could be very scary and be very powerful. Some of the other kinds of data, you'd rather keep it private because you just want to keep it private. But you got a lot of nuts out there, and their ability to take geolocation data and then do something that can be very negative and very deadly in certain instances. That's one of those areas where I think there is some sort of we need more regulation or something, because it's too easy to get that data and then to do something with it. I mean, I don't know how the whole Pelosi, the guy entering the Pelosi house, how that came about, but I could see if there was some way that he was tracking their movements some way and then being able to use that knowledge to do something like what they did. And it just feels like maybe there's the data, having so much access to so many different kinds of data and potentially in real time. It's just something that nobody considered 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And the first impulse was to use this data for something good, which is great. But then once this stuff gets out into so many different hands and then so many different people have so many different motives, that's where it kind of lost control of this thing. And I don't know, are we at the point where this is like a Pandora's box? It's out. There's no going back. How do we make the best of this situation going forward? I don't know, but it feels like, when we started doing this to where we are now, I think everybody has gotten more education, but even with the education, it feels like the problem has gotten harder to deal with and further spread. And so I kind of struggle sometimes with some of this, because you don't want to cut out the positives and the good intent, because the things that we didn't really think of up front are becoming even more, almost overtaking some of that positivity. And geolocation is one of those that really, I think I kind of struggle with.
What is that quote? Like the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
Basically, the case. I mean, I wish I had a happier story to end on, but on the geolocation tracking, a big one in recent news was, I feel like this should have gotten way more publicity than it really did. But the World Cup app that the Qatari are using in their for the World Cup, mandatory for all attendees in order to get into games. It does like COVID tracking. And let me just read out like a couple of the things that this Norwegian security expert dude found about it. So the app has always-on GPS tracking, complete access to phone, including the ability to read, erase, and modify data, remote access to connect to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, the ability to override all other apps on the phone, complete control, ensuring the device can't be turned off or made to sleep. And there's other things on it as well. But so like in order to go to the World Cup, you have to install this app, and that has like your tickets, your passes, where you can access restrictions for COVID and all that kind of stuff, all baked into this one super app. And like nobody seemed to care. Like it just was like, all right, cool. Yeah, we'll just get, tracked forever. Like I think there was even like some kind of EU statement that basically said like, don't install the app until you're like at the airport ready to fly to Qatar for the World Cup. Because if you start installing it before, you're like just having it there. And so it was, and then the second you get off the plane, uninstall it there as well. Like don't have that running around anywhere at all. And like somehow we're writing articles about when to install and when to delete the app, and not so much questioning why does this app even exist and why is it so invasive. But that was definitely an interesting story. Did either of you guys hear about this one or anything else? I have a couple of friends who actually went to a World Cup, and they said it's real. Like it's on your phone. One friend took a second phone just to put the app on. Like that was it.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's what I would do if I were going. Any predictions for the coming year? How do you think the next year is gonna turn out?
Positive only, Brent. Not your doom and gloom.
Why you put me on the spotlight?
I'll go first while you think of something positive.
Please, thank you.
I think awareness in general, like Brent said just now, is going to go up. I think no matter what happens, more and more people will get caught doing things that they shouldn't have gotten caught for, and it'll bring the story up a little bit more. I think also this location stuff in general location tracking, I think is going to become a bigger and bigger deal as that data becomes a little bit more, I would say, exposed, or kind of the impacts of it being exposed. And then what do you call it? Otherwise, there's been talks. There's always talks about some sort of privacy regulation, but if we can get anything done there, even at the most basic level, that would be great. But otherwise, I think in general, I think it will get a little worse, because I do think market conditions will make companies a little bit more desperate to be a little bit more invasive. But I'm hoping that in their attempt to be desperate, they'll make some mistakes and it'll expose some kind of misuses, and that'll cause a spark for maybe some sort of a public sentiment change. So maybe things will get worse before they get better, but I think people will make some mistakes in desperate times as the economy goes down, and that'll lead to kind of a greater good at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I agree with you on that in particular. I think it's going to be both sides. I think desperation goes with the company, and to a certain extent with the consumers, who are going to be looking for ways to make additional income if they are affected, their jobs are they're affected. But I do think there's a potential backlash, because I think there'll be a lot of overreach with this. We already see it, but I think when times get desperate, companies and people get desperate, and overreach will become really bad, and to the point where there may be something that is so horrendously done that maybe there'll be some pullback finally, and maybe the pendulum swings back towards the positive as opposed to the dark side. Because I do feel like the data and the pull for data is so hard, and it's so tempting that when you see a company like Apple, I hate to go back, but they don't really have to do some of the things they're doing, because they're already the highest market cap, and they're the one company that really has not been terribly impacted in terms of their market value. But yet and still they're doing some of these things. And so you're like, well, geez, why? So I don't know. Maybe there's going to be some tough road ahead, because desperation causes companies and people to do things, and to people were probably desperate to go to the World Cup, so they're like, hey, just let me have whatever I need, whatever app I need. Just let me get it so I can go in and watch the game. Mm-hmm. And by that, they don't even know the things that they've opened themselves up to, because they were so focused on the one positive of going to the World Cup. So I see a lot of that thinking carrying over, maybe getting worse, and then maybe an overreach causes a bit of a drawback. I do think there's be some regulation. I don't know exactly how much or how deep. This TikTok thing, there's more than just regulation. There's politics involved with that. There's geopolitics even. So I do expect something to happen there, but I don't ever see it getting to the point where they're banning, that from the U.S. But yeah, there's a couple of things I see.
Yeah, I think there is
How
a.
positive was that for you, Tish?
I suspect it's gonna. I mean, I agree with both of you. It's gonna get worse next year before it gets better. When it gets worse, that's where the regulations will come in, and also people awareness. The awareness is already going up. The number of people who are caring about privacy is going up every month, and it is bounced back due to the abuses that are going on. They're being tired on the abuses, and it is not just in US. I'm seeing this around the world, where the interest on privacy is super high. It's much higher than what we saw the last couple of years. So that is very bullish on the direction. Obviously, it'll get worse next year because either recession or times getting tough and marketing budgets tightening or whatnot. There is also one other trend I suspect, because when that happens, when there is a pushback, there is a requirement to look for alternative business models. Twitter is experimenting with one with, say, Twitter Blue or whatnot, right? Will the subscription revenue be a positive sign where they replace the advertising revenue? That is something worth watching closely. I'm certainly closely watching that. I think of it like a Costco. Costco's majority of their revenue profits comes from their subscription, not selling the products, because the margins of the products are extremely low. They make billions basically based on subscription. That is their primary revenue generator. Can ad companies go down that path, and what percentage of revenue will they contribute? And so can they replace their surveillance business model with something reasonable? That is something we'll likely see, because when there is a pushback, there is a push towards an alternative business model, and we'll likely see some of those evolve sometime next year. At least I'm hopeful on that.
Yeah, I think on the Twitter Blue thing, I think I saw that if you subscribe, you're supposed to get half as many ads, but then I don't know what full amount of ads is, and how do you know if you're actually getting half or not? I guess you kind of just take their word for it, but yeah, I think subscription system might be better in the future. And then the one thing I totally forgot to talk about, but I definitely wanted to, this is going to be a long one, but the rise of kind of these whole AI systems that are coming out and the privacy implications of that. I think between ChatGPT, there's been a big some app on your phone that you basically upload some pictures to, and it'll apply some stylistic stuff to it and make it look different, Lensa or something like that. There's a bunch of these apps that will apply these DALL-E type interfaces on top of. And ultimately, all this data is coming from public sources. And so is that data allowed to be essentially scraped and then reused and then recreated? And is that any kind of a consideration? Maybe stay tuned for next year's Watching Privacy, where we will dive into this. Maybe that's the hook for people to stick around. Who knows? But yeah, definitely just a thought to consider, I guess, for keep people in mind. These AI systems are built on data, and that data comes from somewhere. And so as long as you're aware of that, I guess maybe you can make some cognizant decisions on kind of on your thought process and do research on it. But yeah, otherwise, I think it's a pretty good wrap, good amount of time. Let's see. Like, share, subscribe for potential future content. Not exactly sure what the plan is for 23, but I think we'll get back into the swing of things, try to do more content, more either live streams for updates or shorter videos on different privacy topics. Maybe leave a comment on what you want to see content about, and we'll create something up based on that. But yeah, otherwise, I guess that's pretty much it. Any other final words from either of you two?
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Go Rams.
you can't even look in the camera and say "Go Rams," Brent. That's how depressing the year is.
It's go somewhere. Anyway, looking forward to next year. It should be interesting.
All right. Happy holidays to everybody, and thanks for joining. See y'all next time. Bye.